Hey there, horror fans, and welcome to episode 68 of Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. I am your host, James Ferguson. This week's guest is Enrica Jang, the writer of Crossing from Red Stylo Media. This is a solid and unique ghost story comic. I was blown away by the first issue, so I was very quick to back Enrica's new Kickstarter campaign for the second and third issues of Crossing. At the time of this recording, Enrica is halfway to her funding goal with 3 weeks left. After the campaign meets its budget, the only stretch goals planned are for more comics, which is something I really respect. I think we can all get behind more comics. You can find Enrica and Red Stylo Media at redstylo.com, as well as Facebook and Twitter. If you back the Red Stylo Media Patreon, you'll also receive access to the previous anthology title from the publisher too. In other news, former guest Pat Shand is back on Kickstarter to fund the release of the original graphic novel Afterglow with artist Lynn Smith. It's a post-apocalyptic adventure following a girl and her giant mutated cat. I am so in. In other news, I had mentioned some time ago that I was going to make a comic this year. That is still happening and is moving forward to some extent. After completing the Comics Experience Intro to Comic Book Writing course, which I highly recommend, I ended up with a 5-page script that I was really happy with. I'm now working on getting this made. It's something small, but it's coming together. I saw the layouts last week, and it was amazing. Everyone should make comics, because it feels so awesome seeing your words come to life like this. I'll keep you guys posted as this develops. Alright, that is it for the news and updates this week, so let's dive right into episode 68 of Funny Book Splatter with my guest, Enrica Jang. So to start us off, if you had to describe Crossing to someone, whether on the convention floor, or passing in the street, or something like that, how would you pitch the book to them?
Crossing is a story of an annoying goth princess who is haunting the rookie train conductor who ran her over. She says that her death was actually a murder, made to look like a suicide, and she can't cross over until he helps her solve her case. So that's my elevator pitch.
That's great. I love the phrase "goth princess." First of all, is something I don't think we hear as much as we should. Especially since I heard yesterday, at the time of recording this, was World Goth Day.
It was World Goth Day, which is just amazing. And you go through the Twitter on it and just see these like pictures of miserable people. It's wonderful.
Well, yeah.
Somebody did point out to me that the goth in our comic, she's very shouty, and that's where I think where the princess part comes in. Princesses shout, but it's more of she's not stoic. She's just pissed all the time. Well, so
there's every type of goth, I think. So they're not all just quiet, cool, and collected and miserable. Some are going to be loud and angry. I mean,
that's right.
That's how we got things like Marilyn Manson. So it's fine. And I can.
But it's also dating myself. Like when I was in high school, to be goth was the scariest thing, and compared to teachers were frightened of these kids who would come in with like white skin and black lipstick and nail polish and all that other stuff. And I just remember it just being this, especially in suburbs of Columbus, Ohio. The goth kids were very, very frightening. So there's just that left over for me, which is a lot of fun.
Well, look, I understand. I understand the characters, what they're going through, because I did go through a goth phase as well, so I fully understand that. I had hair down to my shoulders. I had a lot of black T-shirts with white words on them, like allergic to sunlight or something like that. So totally understand.
Was your favorite movie The Crow?
What's that?
Was your favorite movie The Crow?
I didn't get into that until later, but I was more on the music side of it, so I joke about Marilyn Manson, but I legit had a Marilyn Manson blacklight poster hanging up on my wall, which freaked out my parents to no end. They're like, "What's wrong with him? Is he okay?"
Was this before his glam period though?
It was, and I'll never forget I would always read a lot as a kid, and I would read I would read Stephen King and all these other stuff as a kid. And then the one book my mom put her foot down with was the Marilyn Manson autobiography, where it was like, no, you're not going to read this book. That's going to turn you to the devil. But yeah, here's it. Here's, The Shining. Go ahead. Yeah, read those. That's fine.
Read those. Yes. Sorry.
But
it's a lot of my job now is sort of this brooding. I write comics, but I also work in a Poe museum in Baltimore, Maryland. And so there is sort of an expectation to be very Edgar Allan Poe-ish about things. Mm-hmm. And here I am making videos on Facebook and Kickstarter with lots of exclamation points and happiness. So
that's okay. But like, you don't have to like wear a top hat to work or anything, do you?
No.
I don't know why. Like that's what I envision the Poe historian to be like. Obviously, he has to wear a top hat or something.
Right. No, I sometimes the black nail polish. That's
mm-hmm.
about as fine, but pretty smiley and pretty happy for Poe House, which is disconcerting for some folks. So
now, going back to Crossing a bit here. So is the main character, well, the goth princess? What is her name again? I'm sorry.
Nina. So
is she blaming the train conductor for her death, or is she just like, you need to solve my death?
There's a little bit of just being pissed off that she's dead and not understanding why that's happening. I think the bigger issue for these two people is that they have completely different takeaways from an event that they were both at. You've got a train conductor who he saw a woman alone on the tracks. He saw her walk into his train. Mm-hmm. And this was his first day as an engineer. He's a train conductor, but this is his first day as an engineer. And so he saw her, and he knows what he saw, and he really believes he knows exactly what happened. And then there's Nina, who's a ghost, and that's already a level of complication that neither of them anticipated. But then she's absolutely adamant that she knows she did not kill herself. She doesn't know what happened, but I didn't kill myself. I didn't kill myself. Mm-hmm. So when you got two people who are so absolutely certain of their point of view, and they were at the same thing, there's this, the dress is white, the dress is blue, mm-hmm. the Yanni, Laurel, like you've got this whole like dissonance between these two people who are absolutely certain that they know that they are right, and they just need to show this other person reason, and that's just not going to happen. So that's the real conflict between these two folks. And then the mystery of, okay, so is she just crazy? Is she in denial? Did she kill herself? And then, like, why are they connected, and how do they get free of each other? And the only way they can figure out how to do that is if they work together.
Yeah, see, this sounds like a great buddy cop comedy mystery kind of thing, which is great. Like, it is a very fun premise to play with. I mean, like, fun for horror fans because it involves ghosts and death and, a train smashing into a poor woman. But, that's what horror fans, can thrive on. But I like this idea that they're, like, thrown together. And what's that? There's that saying, what is it? Like, there's three sides to every story. It's like yours, mine, and the truth. So it's like,
yes,
that can certainly apply in this situation because, well, neither of them trust the other one in terms of their take on the story, but they're kind of stuck together for better or worse in this situation because Nina's not going to leave him alone. It seems until she gets to the bottom of this. It's a very specific kind of haunting,
there's that effect. She can't. She doesn't really know. Neither of them really know how the ghost things, like how the ghost stuff works anyway. Mm-hmm. And so that's also sort of figuring out what is really binding them together. Because not everybody who gets hit by a train turns into a ghost.
Very true.
And not, and not everybody who sort of in this sort of weird circumstance are bound to get to each other in this way. And so there's a very specific reason how this happened and why it happened. And some of the clues are in issue 1, and then we drop the more clues until we get into the final issues. So, but there's some very specific circumstances that have to happen in order for two souls to be bound. And in the second issue, I'm not giving too much away when I say in the second issue, we sort of see other people in the same circumstance, and part of this mystery is figuring out what it is about their situations, other than the train, mm-hmm. that made them ghosts and make them bound together, and what's gonna eventually break the bond. So.
Awesome! Like I'm really excited for this. So now, how the Kickstarter you're running right now is for the second and the third issues. How long are you planning to run the series?
It's a 6-issue miniseries, and the artist on this is Alex Cormack, and we're also working with Mark Mullaney on colors and letters. Now,
how did you assemble the art team for this project?
Well, it actually goes back to Poe. The very first, my publishing company is Red Stylo Media, and we do a series of annual anthologies every year. And both Mark and Alex were in our very first book, the Poe Twisted Anthology, which was a collection of comics inspired by Poe. And that was, gosh, all the way back in 2011. And we sort of worked on different stories. I was the editor for that book, and then the two of them did different stories in that book. And we've just been working together ever since. Alex has gone on to do just work with so many different wonderful companies. He's prolific in terms of his production, the different books he's worked on. And then Mark has been nominated for Emmys 3 times in animation for different projects. So it's wonderful that they still remember me and work with me because they've gone on to do such incredible things. But that's how the band got together.
That's awesome. So you have this, you started small with smaller anthologies, and then, I guess as the editor in that role, you're able to look at it and go like, hey, like, I see everyone's work that comes through here. I like you. Can you do this with me?
We'll beg and plead, like, this was so good, don't you think? Don't you want to come back? And so I'm very much, I play the cheerleader, and I rope them into stuff, and they are very generous and wonderful in working with me, agreeing to work with me. So.
Yeah. Now, and you've done a number of these anthologies. I know I've backed a couple of them. I know I've missed a couple of them along the way. But how was that experience of doing, like, how did you get into doing a yearly anthology? It seems like it's a monumental task to assemble all these different creators at once and put together this book. So, like, how does that kind of I guess how did that start? And then what keeps you going to do this over and over again every year?
Oh man. Well, I tell people, I do get asked that question, and I tell people that it was all a happy accident in a way. Mm-hmm. A lot of indie comics, indie folks, when you're trying to break into comics, the advice you will get from everybody is, if you want to get into comics, you have to make comics. That's the only way to do it. And if you want to be a comics creator, you just have to create them and then sort of get into the mix that way. It's the same thing with editing. There's sort of a natural nexus between going from being a creator to an editor, but those things are not always the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so if you want to be treated seriously as an editor, you have to edit other people's work. You can't just keep editing your own stuff. So I knew that I wanted to get into comics. I wanted to get into the business of comics, and I knew that nobody was going to take me seriously unless I was willing and able to edit other people's work. So put together the Poe Twisted anthology. Loved Poe anyway, so it was sort of a combination of all the things I loved: comics, literature, favorite author, all that other stuff, and then got 13 other creators to jump in on that book. And the book was so successful that you want to do it again. You want to sort of make the magic again. So the next year we did a Shakespeare anthology, and that was 32 creators. And this crazy number of stories and this wonderful book. And because the anthologies meant so much, and because it was just sort of a very positive experience, it was sort of a natural fit to keep going. But it was very much sort of accident in that way. And then it seems harder, but actually when anybody who's worked on a comic series can tell you, sometimes working with a smaller team is harder than working with a really big group of people. Mm-hmm. Because with a big group of folks, there's always somebody else to kind of, like, you go to them, you work with that small group of, like, that sort of cluster of creators on one story, then they knows what they're supposed to do. You let them do their work, and then you go yell at somebody else, and you go talk to them and massage a different group, and then you go back. And when you're in that mix and, like, that creative energy, just sort of, you can stay at the same level of creative energy with a big group of people because you're going to different folks at different times. Whereas with one creative team, you're all looking at each other sometimes like, all right, now you go.
Mm-hmm. I guess there's only
now
so
you
many
go.
times,
and you have to.
Yeah, I guess there's only so many times that you could just like keep asking the guy, or like the artist or the colorist or whatever. You're like, hey, like where is this? Like we need this. Can you get? We can't keep going until we get this piece of artwork or this script or something like that. So I can see that you're kind of like spinning plates in that regard, just keeping them all going in order to get an anthology done, and then hopefully by the end it's like, all right, you're not like nagging too many people at once, but then like everyone's like, oh, okay, no, like we stayed on target, we got everything done, and everything was good. That's
then
the
if
hope.
you get a large enough group, some people just drop off by attrition. It's a little like Battle Royale, like they're just killing each other off and do whatever. And so by the end of it, if you've all come out and you've all survived, then you get to be in the movie, and that's it. But the other folks that died along the way, they're just in the road. They're gone. You wait for them and you keep going.
So I guess you could start out with a larger group of creators, and then you wean them out like some weird reality show in that case of like who gets to be in the anthology.
That's right. Well, we do an open call, which is cutthroat enough. Especially this last every year we do the anthology. So this year's theme is Jekyll and Hyde, and that book's going to be coming out in October. And this year we really did kind of like pit people against each other because it's a double-sided anthology, and folks are
fitting in the case of a Jekyll and Hyde story.
You had to choose Jekyll as right. So you had to choose Jekyll as your inspiration, or you had to choose Hyde as your inspiration, and then you have to be on the other. On that side of the book. However, if there wasn't a counterpart, if there wasn't going to be a story on the other side, that story didn't survive. And we, as editors, kind of challenged ourselves. I have another two editors on that book this year, Genevieve Trainer and Mark Mullaney on that book. And the challenge that we gave ourselves was, unless we can sort of strike this balance, we're not going to let one side kind of overshadow the other and sort of keep the balance of Jekyll and Hyde for the book. So we'll see how well we did that this coming October. But crossings first.
Yes, yeah. So I get this is, I feel like this is going to sound like a jerk question to ask, but there's the first crossing came out like a year plus ago, and now we're getting into issues 2 and 3. Is why the large gap between the two issues? Oh
man, we were sort of a victim of our own success in a way. The great thing about the first Kickstarter, we were funded within 48 hours. And it was a smaller goal than what we're shooting for now, but we had such a tremendous reaction to it from the very beginning. And the thing about Kickstarter now is it really is a global market. It's great for indie creators, and on the creator side, it's this wonderful way to sort of get the work out there. But Kickstarter is really a way where a lot of people shop for indie now. The folks, like, you're not going to find that stuff in stores. You're going to find this great stuff on Kickstarter when it's just beginning. But then it's also these bigger companies kind of come along and they kind of scope what's successful and what's not. And I think for me, I'm embarrassed to say this, got attention because we were, at the party having a good time. And when the discussion started to sort of, do we want to go with another publisher? Do we want to maybe turn Crossing into something else? Do we want to do this? All of those discussions made it harder to put out a second issue because you don't know what direction. If a bigger company comes along and they want to kind of pick it up, what direction are they going to want us to go? Maybe we should wait and see. And we did go to San Diego Comic-Con that year and got some, everybody's like looking at Hollywood, and Hollywood's looking at you and looking at Hollywood and like, hey, we're going to do something here. And getting that attention was absolutely fantastic. But that meant second issue and third issue were on hold while we waited. And then I finally just realized, you know what, nothing's going to happen unless it gets done. Nothing's going to happen unless the series is finished. So I learned a very important lesson in terms of the first year. You have to finish this project before you can entertain any of this stuff. So I think that's where we are now.
That's still like, it sounds it sounds like a harrowing tale, but at the same time it's like, no, you learned valuable lessons, like you said, but it's not like you were just like sitting on your hands the whole time, because you've been pumping out these anthology books as well. But it sounds like you have a good kind of game plan for the rest of the series too. So is that like, I guess, how far ahead are you in that? All right, these 2 issues are being worked on, and that's what the Kickstarter is for. But like, are you already like have your eyes set on 4, 5, and 6?
Oh yes. The series is written, and that was an important thing for me, even when we just started, because it was a very important lesson that I learned at the very beginning of just working in comics. Is you can start putting out issues, but if the series isn't finished, you're in real trouble. Yeah. So the series is written, and then Alex Cormack is an incredible artist, and he is getting into his rotation. He's been very busy too, working on different books in this mix. So staying like in his queue, staying in his list, has been very important for me. But I think we have a little bit of a surprise waiting for this campaign. As you know, like Kickstarter is one of those things where you either fund or you don't get anything. You set a goal and you set a clock, and you got to try to sort of push it until the end. But then, a lot of people, if they make their goal ahead of time, they like go for stretch goals.
Right.
Knock on wood. Don't want to be bad luck to talk about it, but we decided very early on that we would not have any more stretch goals other than more issues. So if we can fund this campaign before our clock ends, the only stretch goal we're going to have is the next issue before New York Comic Con in October. And that way we don't. It's sort of a trap sometimes. When you have like a really good Kickstarter, you've got a solid project, you may not get 6, 7, like you might not get those big figures, but you do have a solid following. You've got a solid response from your audience. If you sort of make it more complicated and have lots of different rewards and all that other stuff, a lot of these projects fail after they're funded because they overpromised. Right. So we decided that the only thing we were going to do, the only thing that anybody has ever said they wanted from us was more issues. They didn't want stickers. They like stickers. They like pins. They like that stuff. But what they really wanted was more issues. So that's the only thing that we're going to stretch and try to give. And so double-sized issue, double-sized campaign for this go around with 2 and 3, but if we can get funded before the clock runs out, our only stretch goal is going to be issue 4 before the end of the year.
Honestly, I wish more people did that, because you're absolutely right. Yeah, like buttons or posters or prints or something. Like I'm literally sitting like in my office right now. I went through and cleaned my desk over the weekend, and I found piles of prints, like small, prints that were just like thrown into Kickstarter campaigns. I'm like, I don't have enough wall space in my entire house to put all these up. And I'm like, they're gorgeous. And like, I can't throw these out. I can't get rid of them. I paid for these because they're, I backed the Kickstarter campaign and got thrown in there. But I'm like, I just don't have any place to put any of these. And it's like, again, it's nice to have, but yeah, give me a bonus story. Give me, even if it's just like a PDF where it's like, we wrote this, we made this extra story, didn't get a chance to put it in the book, or, it came out after the fact. Great. That's awesome. But yeah, like the buttons or stickers or patches or, all this other stuff. Yeah. No, I backed for the comic book. That's what I want. I want the comic.
Right. And if we can give more, that is the highest praise that anybody has ever, can ever give a creators, what's the next, what happens next?
Yeah.
What happens next? That anybody's asking you that question, that's why you're there. And you never want to forget that's why you're there. So absolutely.
Yeah, but again, that's such a solid stretch goal. And again, I honestly wish more people did that. I feel like that, we would be better off, because you're so right in that, I've seen the pitfalls of oh, okay, we gave people a poster and a pin and a comic book and this other thing. It's like, now what box is going to hold all those things? Whereas a comic will fit in one box. You know exactly what you need. You get one envelope, you're all set. But then you have to juggle all these other things.
A little Kickstarter tradecraft too. If any of your listeners are actually creators on Kickstarter, they all, if you've done it before, you know that the actual poster tube costs as much as sending the book, and you're basically doubling your shipping if you do stuff like that. Now, I've seen some people be very creative in how they do it, or you have to fold the poster, and nobody wants a folded poster. So Yeah. There are economical reasons for it too. Absolutely.
Yeah. But you seem to have success with Kickstarter. I mean, this is far from your first project, between the ones that you're running personally, the ones for Red Stylo. So is that, is that like, I guess, have you been refining the process for Kickstarter? Have you got it down to kind of a science now?
The rules don't change, so you can get creative within the rules. Like, you know what you're supposed to accomplish, you know what you're supposed to do, and you know, like, how you're supposed to roll the news out. I think one thing that's just sort of a truth for the industry, and it may change, but I used to go to a lot of shows. And when you do the math at the end of the year, you realize that you've shelled out more for travel and more to be there than anything. And you're still not in stores necessarily, because it's hard to get into Diamond, which is the one distributor company for a lot of shops. It's hard to do a lot of that stuff, and it costs a lot of money. And so Kickstarter, though, again, is where people seem to be shopping for indie. Mm-hmm. And they know they may not be able to go to their local comic shop and get that stuff, but they do know they're going to be able to see the newest stuff that's going on in indie on Kickstarter. And you're getting a global audience. A lot of people around the world shop for indie comics on Kickstarter. And that's how our book, I've counted up the countries for just this campaign this time around, and we've got 10 countries now, in addition to the United States. And there's just no way, as a small publisher, I would have been able to reach any of those places on the budget that I'll usually have for something like this. So I think in the campaigns, we try to be very modest in what we ask for, too. And part of it's just I'm still, you know, I get scared of really big numbers, and if you can't quite reach it, like that's a nightmare. So we try to be very modest in what we ask for, but also realistic in what we ask for. And then if we can provide sort of a solid attention and solid care during the campaign, and just sort of continue to show people what we have, that people respond to that. They seem to really like that. You never want to put something up there and then have people asking you questions and not respond. Mm-hmm. So it can be tough sometimes, because if you've got a lot of people, that's a lot of demand, but it's always a wonderful thing when people want to know more and they're asking for more. And so I'm always very grateful for that.
Yeah, I think comics has that kind of feather in its cap when it comes to Kickstarter, because of like the modest goals it can be. So like I've seen Kickstarter campaigns for comics, they're asking for like $300, and it's like that's probably a lot less than what they really need, but they're almost like guaranteed to hit the goal then. And you know, like if I can't tell you how many times I've seen, you know, we get emails all the time at Horror Talk that are like, oh, hey, I'm a first-time director, and I'm on Kickstarter to try to make this short film, and I need $200,000. And it's like, no one knows who you are. Like, how are you possibly going to raise $200,000? And then, like, even, like, the rewards, it's like, oh, a digital copy of the movie is $50. And it's like, no, like, that is not going to happen. No one is going to back this project. Whereas, like, comics, it's like, okay, it's $5 for a digital copy, and you know their goal is $1,000. Sure, yeah, I can throw that in there, especially if it's like someone I have like absolutely no prior knowledge about. Yeah, that's easy for me to like throw down $5. Worst case, it doesn't come to fruition, I'm out $5. Whereas like if it's something like $50 like that, like that's a tougher pill to swallow.
Yeah. Well, I think that too, like part of the crowdfunding magic, and some people don't, especially when it comes to like friends and family. I've got folks who come up to me and said, well, you know, I could only put, you know, $1 or $2 into this thing, so I didn't pledge because I just felt like that was going to insult you. And I want to smack them first and say, no, insult me, no, understand. The crowd fund, this whole thing is you give what you can, because every single bit you're working with this entire audience of people to help. So no, insult me, that's fine. just jump, because just showing up, that's a body. And we say that a lot, especially for this book. We need bodies. Mm-hmm. It's a book about dead people, so it's always good to we need bodies, and that makes me happy. And if people can give more, if they want more, that is, but you have to be grateful for every single thing And we try to give people something at every single level. A thing right now, your lowest level is, just a thank you. And as much as that's great, we are always thankful. We want to give you something. So you're going to get a PDF at every single level of this comic, no matter what you give, because that's just you're helping us out. You just are. Every single bit counts. So.
Well, yeah, that's the whole point with it. Yeah, I really can't believe that. Like, and I guess that explains why, I've seen on some Kickstarters where it's like, yeah, it's, here's $1. Like, there is $1 pledge level. If you want to just, I think you actually have one in yours too. Like, it is there. It's like, yeah, throw in $1. Like, if this is all you want to throw in there, every dollar helps. Like, go ahead. It's a starting point, and you could fill that in later, or do whatever that they have to do to at least get their foot in the door.
Yeah, and you get the backer updates by doing that and stuff like that. So, but it can go both ways. Like some people, if they can't give a lot, they're not going to give anything, and because they think that it's going to insult you. Mm-hmm. And the great thing about crowdfunding is just having people who want to be there at all. I'm thankful for that every day.
Yeah. Well, not only is Kickstarter a great place to find indie comics, but I feel like it's fostered a really great community, and that you have a number of campaigns under your belt that you're able to then tap into that audience. So the hope is, if they backed your last campaign, especially for Crossing #1, that they would all come back and back for this one too. So the bare minimum, you would get the same amount of people from that campaign and then go into this one.
Okay, I'm gonna take your recording. I'm gonna play this for all those people who backed the first one, and we're gonna. I'm just gonna just this little clip. I'm like, hey guys, hello. So no, we've got we hit over 100 this past weekend, which was amazing. The first campaign we hit 300, which at that time it still astounds me. Today it still astounds me. So as many people as we can to get on, that makes me happy. That number will make me happy, no matter how many.
All right, so let's bounce back into Crossing and just in horror in general. So I think what I'm curious of now is, well, how did you arrive upon like something like Crossing? I know it's like the corny interview thing, but more about like, I guess were ghosts always something that was of interest to you? Was that like, because I could speak from just experience and how much I love Ghostbusters, but that's like a very different kind of story.
I have had the fortune. I've been very lucky in a weird way to work near ghosts and death my entire life. If that's so strange. I used to work I worked in a cemetery selling cemetery property when I was living in Virginia, and learned so much about death as an industry. And burial practice and stuff like this. And as a writer and a lover of the macabre, I too love Stephen King. Edgar Allan Poe is my favorite author. I work now at the Edgar Allan Poe House in Baltimore, so I'm close to it in a lot of my life. Mm-hmm. I lived in Savannah, Georgia, which is one of the more haunted places in the country, and I worked at a building on River Street called Moon River Brewery. And History Channel at one time said that this building was the most haunted building in America. And I worked in the second floor just doing the books for this little brewery for a year and a half, and loved being close to it, and love old buildings and creaky floors and sheets and wailing and all this other stuff and living in these old cities. But nothing's ever happened to me. Mm-hmm. Yes. Which is it's like knock on wood too. I've lived in places that literally apartment complex built on a old cemetery, like seriously something out of Poltergeist. And at the same time, like I'll have friends that came to my apartment, and they said that they felt things, and I never did, even though I loved the idea of all of it. So I think part of this is just like more of like a wish. Mm-hmm. I can write stories where these things happen, and sort of I want to talk to a ghost. And, well, do I want to talk to a ghost? If we did, we'd probably fight. And just that kind of stuff.
I just think it's funny because, like, I feel like then to the paranormal world, everyone thinks you're trying too hard. It's like, no, look, she keeps going every single haunted. Like, you go from one most haunted building to the next. Like, we get it. You want to talk to us. Not right now. Jeez.
Exactly. And because I'm trying too hard, they don't care. It's like, whatever. So I write these stories. And, but love horror movies, love especially literature. And so a lot of the anthologies that we work on, even if I'm not writing stories in these books, love kind of like immersing in these themes. So we did a Frankenstein anthology, Jekyll and Hyde this year, Poe, and even the Shakespeare that we did had these horror elements, and that's just what I'm drawn to. So that's where that interest came from. But this is the first ghost story I've ever written, and wanted to do something just a little bit different. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so I think that's where I think it's where it started.
Well, it sounds like with the anthology work that you're kind of like scratching a very unique itch in like kind of bridging the gap from classic literature into, you know, I guess modern day horror to an extent, and that with, you know, things like Shakespeare and Jekyll and Hyde and things like that. That's like there's a specific, like, I don't want to say market, but, you know, like people are interested in that, and like you get into like that literature nerd aspect of it, and then it's like, yeah, but people that also like to be scared, and it's like, you know, you may have read Frankenstein and it's like, okay, that was a cool book, or we've seen the movies and I really like that, but like, what else is there? And like, there's always this sense, well, one, because all those things are in public domain, so it's easy to kind of tap into those things, but
there's that.
You know, that's helpful, but you know, there's this idea that you could explore those stories and add to them and see where else those paths can take is a really unique idea, and that's something that, like, I think like I said, it's a unique itch to scratch, but I think there's a definite audience for something like that.
It has been really neat. Like, people's reaction has been just really great, and I think that's what sustained us as a company. We're not making a ton of money, mm-hmm. unfortunately, but we do have a very great audience, and the more people that we meet, those stories resonate for a reason, and so giving people something original, but calling the inspiration, sort of calling our shot, and sort of saying we're inspired by these things, and if you love them, hopefully you'll love these things too. That's where, yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, I mean, It's a solid bet with those kind of things. I like how you described it, calling your shot a little bit.
Yeah, it can be nerve-wracking because if somebody's comparing you to, I wrote a sequel to Edgar Allan Poe's Cask of Amontillado, and I had some of my college friends sort of looking at me sideways, like, you really? But yeah, you really want to do this stuff, and I love, especially in popular culture, when you see some of these literary influences sort of come in and permeate this really great stuff. That's always fun for me.
I want to go back to crossing. Just I know I don't want it to sound like I'm like, you know, oh no, we got on a tangent, because that's exactly what the show is about. I'm like, no, we want to just talk and figure out what, you know, what all this stuff, where all this goes. But I don't want to describe it as like a paranormal romance kind of thing, but there are an odd couple between these two characters. I mean, is there a hint of that in Crossing, or is that just like, well, no, there's a guy and a girl, obviously they go together?
I try to give credit where credit's due. Some of the better lines in Crossing and the fights between Nina and MC, the main characters, some of those fights, like, some of those lines come straight out of fights with my husband. And just the sort of, he's infuriating and hilarious often at the same time, and so, like, we'll be screaming about something and he'll just, like, sort of rattle off hilarious things, and he wins the fight because he made me laugh. But then I'm very strong-willed, and he's very stubborn, and so we'll just sort of go at it, and the fights are pretty epic. So there was a little bit of sort of bringing that in. In terms of romance, I think, try not to think of it, well, if I think about it too hard, because it's a man and a woman, the dynamic is, of course, gonna get in the way. Mm-hmm. That sort of classic, well, you're calling me a bitch, well, blah, 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 and you're a bastard, and blah, 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 and a lot of that stuff. But we try to kind of turn it on its head, too. How do I explain it better?
I think that's good, because like I'm kind of tired of that kind of stuff to an extent, where it's like, you know, that is that stereotypical thing where it's like, oh, the guy and the girl, like, they're gonna hate each other, and then it's you know, this is like the weirdest meet cute ever, but like, you know, it's but somehow, you know, these crazy kids will make it work. Like, no, like, they don't have to. They could just infuriate each other, and that's the story. And, you know, I see these things like, you know, this is a weird pull, but like, the current Green Lanterns book, with the S at the end, they're partners. It's a guy and a girl, but then they occasionally flirt with this, like, oh, possibly, maybe they'll get together. I'm like, no, they're partners and they work well together. There's no need for them to also be romantically involved. And, I'm glad to see that there's like a tide chain, you know, moving away from that kind of like stereotypical story there too.
Yeah. Well, there's also one of my favorite skits on Saturday Night Live is, when Cecily does this whole thing, the girl that you wish you hadn't started talking to at the party. And you might have seen her across the room, she's really hot, but then you go and talk to her, and she's like, Seth, like, of course. And it's just this girl that you really wish you hadn't started talking to. And then there's the same thing on the other side. Like, there's this guy who's kind of like good looking, and he looks like he's got his stuff together, but then he is just a dick. And why? You're so good looking, and yet you're such a jerk. I'm leaving now. Thanks. But they can't get away from each other. So, the very beginning of Crossing, we deliberately made it sound like they had just hooked up, and it's like after all that stuff's gone, all of the attraction, all of that initial fire's gone, and then you realize, holy shit, I can't stand this person. Bye. But then they can't go anywhere. Then what do you do? So I like that part of it. Like, these people who, it's so easy now to meet people and dismiss them, or, you know, to go swipe left, swipe right, do all this other stuff. It's really easy to just, hey, see ya, bye Felicia, that kind of thing. And what if you can't? What if you actually have to deal with this person? And that happens in life. Like, if that person you have to work with, you can't fire them. They are not going anywhere. So if you don't want to get fired, how do you get through this? And then in the second issue, we're going to be meeting other people with that same dynamic. It's just not the man-woman dynamic. You got an older guy named Aldo who is stuck with this total drip named Sai, and he's the be a man kind of, stop talking about your feelings, stop being a goth kind of guy. And Sai's just no patience for this asshole that he's stuck with, thinks he's in hell, he's being punished, but they can't get away from each other. And there's just so much about that now. How people don't know what the hell to do with this person that they cannot stand, but they have to share a country with them. What do you do? So that dynamic is everywhere. But hopefully, when you show people that have to make their way through it and get through it, maybe we're figuring out something. You know?
Yeah. If they can work it out, then there's hope for all of us.
Very. Yeah, exactly. So, but we'll see more of that as the series goes on, and that the human stuff appeals to me, but then also the paranormal side of it. Like, what is it that binds a soul to Earth and this energy, and what keeps them there? And again, all the clues are in the first issue, and we'll tease them out as the next issues go on.
I mean, look, that is, it fills me with so much excitement for the rest of the series, and it makes me realize, like, I now have to really go back and reread the first issue before we dive into the issues 2 and 3, just to like fully immerse myself in it again and get ready for it. But I mean, this is, I'm pumped for it. Like, at the time of our chat here, where you're about halfway to the goal, you still got 3 weeks left to go. So I mean, things are looking good. But yeah, I guess, is there anything else you want to kind of like leave people with to say, like, you know, going into Crossing? I mean, outside of the fact, look, you can get the book, you can get art, the whole shebang. But you know, the basics though, you get the book. That's what we're looking for. And like you said, we want to get more books, so that's a good place to start.
Yeah. Can't say enough good stuff about both Alex and Mark. Alex Cormack he's really established himself in horror comics. Just did this really great series called Sync.
Yes.
With Tribe, and he is, if you're looking for just bloody goodness, he's there. So this book has a lot of those elements, and you get to see some of the yucky stuff, but and he's so good at that, and so just be there for Alex's art. And then Mark has been just this incredible. He's the one who's like puts a lot of our production stuff together in terms of the videos and the small animations that he gives us to sort of make everything go. And he's the colorist on the book, and been worked with Mark for many years now, and he's absolutely wonderful. So the team, everybody's just really great on this book, and definitely take a look. And we hope you'll jump in. But we're absolutely serious about this. We don't want the same thing that happened before. We will not be sidetracked. We're staying on this track, and if we can get funded before the clock runs out, our only stretch goal is going to be the next issue. And we really hope that we have the privilege to get that far. But no matter what, 2 and 3 are the goals for this campaign, and 4 is not going to be that far behind.
Awesome. Yeah, and I guess is that pun intended as well, as you stay on the right track, knowing that Nina died on a trade car.
That's the theme, and just creatively and everything. It's sort of as a creator, there's so many. Everybody's a good idea factory. Everybody's like, this would be a great idea, and this would be a great idea. And when you're a creator, you want to pursue just about everything, but most of it is showing up and getting it done and doing the work, and not getting sidetracked by any other promises or any other possibilities, because if it's not done, it's not going to matter. So
very true.
Creatively and from a professional standpoint, that's been my theme, stay on track in more ways than one. So, and I love puns, so that's me.
Yeah, I mean, very, very wise words to kind of wrap us up here. But also, where are the best places to find you online too?
Spend a lot of time on Facebook and Twitter. So Facebook / Red Stylo Media, and then we are Red_Stylo on Twitter. Have Instagram and stuff, but if you want to see everything, redstylo.com has links to everything.
Cool, and you guys have a Patreon as well, right?
We do. Patreon.com / Red Stylo. We have a really great, solid group of folks who support us on Patreon, and you get to see all of the stories from our anthologies when you become a patron. So it's not just the new stuff you're going to get, but you'll be able to read the entire library of our posts if you become a patron. So thank you for mentioning that, because a lot of the folks that we have on there they funded my very first Kickstarter for Azteca, and I've known these guys for a really long time, some of my best friends. So yeah. That's
cool. So if you want to hang out with Enrica, back the Patreon campaign. That's a good place to start. So, all right. Again, Crossing is still running strong on Kickstarter. I back the campaign myself. I do put my money where my mouth is on the show. So, I'm looking forward to issues 2 and 3. And after speaking with you, I'm really pumped about it. So I'm very much looking forward to it. But the link to the Kickstarter will be in the show notes as well. But I think that kind of does it for this episode of Funny Book Splatter. I have been James Ferguson with my guest Enrica Jang. You've been listening to Funny Book Splatter, a horror comics podcast brought to you by HorrorTalk.com. We've been bringing you the best in horror since 2002. In addition to comics, we cover movies, TV shows, books, and video games. We've got news, reviews, guest features, interviews, unboxing videos, and much more. Be sure to sign up to Steve's Deals newsletter to increase your horror collection without breaking the bank. Check us out at HorrorTalk.com and at HorrorTalk on Twitter.